Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And in a world littered with dark dungeons, giant bugs, and literal serial killers, like Skyrim is, there's bound to be a few spooky, scary moments waiting for you. And as we've already established, though the Elder Scrolls V is well past 6 years old, Skyrim is simply so vast that a lot of things can go unnoticed, even after all this time. So today, without further ado, we'll be taking a look at 5 scary secrets you may have missed in the Elder Scrolls V. Starting off, the Soul Charon in it of itself is a pretty horrifying place to begin with. The plane of oblivion where trapped souls are condemned to spend all of eternity, you can imagine it's got a rather gloomy environment, inhabited by numerous lost and scared souls, as well as possibly thousands of horrifying monster-like beings. The rulers of the Soul Charon are a mysterious bunch known as the Ideal Masters. Their only real known objective is to capture more souls to bring to the Charon. In order to accomplish this goal, they often make deals with mortals and necromancers. Unfortunately for the people they barter with, the Ideal Masters are known to be quite cunning and deceitful, often trapping the souls of those they work with as well. Overall, these are some very evil beings. That said, the player never gets the chance to interact with one of these curious individuals, nor even see one. Or do you? You see, the Ideal Masters never take up a definitive physical appearance, unlike many of the Elder Scrolls' Daedric and other gods. Instead, they seem to exist as pure energy. However, in the 1997 Elder Scrolls game Battlespire, the Soul Charon was invaded by a Daedric army, and the player ended up working with an Ideal Master to help drive them away. That Ideal Master took up the appearance of a crystal of all things. Not a person nor animal, a crystal. Well, in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, you'll notice that in a couple places throughout the Soul Charon, there exist a few giant crystals, just sort of sitting there. Or more specifically, floating. You get the idea. These look strangely reminiscent of our friend. Bethesda never explicitly elaborates on what the purpose of these giant crystals is in Skyrim, however it seems they may in fact be the Ideal Masters themselves, watching over the realm. Now that whole crystal stuff isn't entirely little known in and of itself. There's been numerous videos produced on the subject, all that have come to the same conclusion. However, here's where it gets a little bit weird. You see, some players have reported that when approaching these structures, they actually briefly got a glance of a human-like NPC, sort of floating there statically, before disappearing as the player got closer to render distance. This seems to suggest that Bethesda assigned placeholder NPCs to these crystals, perhaps to be used in some sort of voice-acted dialogue sequence or something similar. Of course, as mentioned, you're never given the chance to interact with these crystals, or Ideal Masters, or whatever it is that these beings are. Suffice it to say, whatever secret they're hiding, they're not talking. Next on our list, we have a very strange mystery with a potentially horrifying significance. The Temple of Rib, I think I pronounced that properly, is a Falmer-inhabited dwarven ruin that exists within the Sightless Pit in Winterhold. It's everything you'd expect out of a Falmer-overrun Dwemer city. It's your typical Falmer dungeon, nothing particularly out of the ordinary, nor is this location used for any quests. Now, just outside the Sightless Pit, on a nearby ledge, is a location not marked on the player's map, but referred to by Bethesda in Skyrim's official game guide as the Altar of Zeus Rib. This location is a bit different. The altar itself is surrounded by bones and skeletons, and laying on the altar is another skeleton that will awake and attack the player when interacted with. Laying just next to the skeleton is a copy of the book Doors to Oblivion, that tells of a man's descent into madness as he explored Oblivion's various realms. It's a rather disturbing read. But back to the point. Considering there's a dwarven temple and altar to some being named Xrib with recent sacrifices, it seems very safe to say that Xrib must have been an important, well-worshipped god. Except, here's the thing. The dwarves didn't worship gods. At least, not in this way. In the book, Battle of the Red Mountain, it's clearly stated that the dwarves specifically mock the whole concept of religion and its rituals, instead preferring their own gods of, quote, reason and logic. Now, to be fair, the Dwemer's relationship with religion is one that's never really been touched upon by Bethesda. At times, the dwarves seem to have at least acknowledged the existence of a few deities, but rather than view them as overlords that should be worshipped, the dwarves instead seem to have seen them as competitors, someone to try and emulate, not pray to. So the existence of a dwarven temple and altar to any being at all is very strange. One theory is that Xrib is actually a Fulmer deity instead. However, this falls apart when you consider the fact that there's a book on the altar, and the Fulmer are literally blind. Then again, this book was written and published after the dwarves died too, so it couldn't have been them either. Whoever Xrib was, it's a mystery whose answer likely died with the dwarves. Coming in at number 3, we have something that's spooky, but rather lighthearted. Dremora are a humanoid form of Daedra that are known for serving Mehrunes Dagon, Daedric Prince of Destruction, and primary antagonist in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. However, Dremora can also serve the player in Skyrim thanks to the spell Conjure Dremora Lord, which will summon a Dremora to act as a follower for a brief period of time. Well, interestingly, if you and your Dremora are near the Shrine of Mehrunes Dagon in Skyrim, your little buddy might actually stop in his tracks and start worshipping the shrine, paying respects to his true master. Depending on the way you look at things, it's both adorable and horribly frightening at the same time. For a 4th spot, this one's actually pretty amusing too, despite its spooky undertone. The Reach is plagued by a rebel uprising of sorts, as a group of bandit-like tribesmen calling themselves the Forsworn seek to conquer it, and drive off both the Imperials and Nords, claiming the Reach for themselves. This has obviously created quite the problem, as the Forsworn constantly murder innocent civilians, attack traders in their caravans, and even torture some people. Suffice it to say, everyone is on edge. Well, when you first enter the Reach's capital of Markarth, some guards may say the following, somewhat reassuring line of dialogue.
This is Markarth, traveler. Safest city in the Reach.
Now, ignoring the fact that Markarth is in fact the only city in the Reach, it looks like Bethesda wrote this line in on purpose, as the first thing the player sees when entering Markarth is a woman get murdered to death on the streets by a Forsworn supporter. It's a sight that very much juxtaposes the guards' promise. Now, to be fair, this statement can also be uttered by guards at mostly any time. Not just when you're first entering the city, though it usually is. Regardless, it seems either Bethesda or these guards has a very ironic sense of humor. And finally, last on our list, we've already briefly mentioned the Fulmer. Former snow elves that essentially sold themselves into dwarven slavery and were forced to eat a mutation-causing fungus. They now exist as grotesque, monster-like beings with similar behavior. In the Dawnguard DLC, the player gets the chance to visit the Forgotten Vale, a majestic hidden-away glacial valley that once served as a snow elf place of worship, but is now overrun with their Fulmer successors. Throughout the Vale, the Dragonborn can find various skeletons and human/Fulmer/snow elf remains. But one corpse in particular, or skeleton, stands out. Just outside the cave in the Vale, hanging by their neck on a rope, are the bones of an obviously unlucky individual. Now, this sight is rather strange, as most of the remains you stumble upon in the Vale seem to have died under more obvious, more chaotic circumstances. Oh, these folks were killed in a great battle. This man got stabbed in the back while running. But this man, or woman, wasn't killed in some big pitched fight, but instead hung for some reason. A look above the cliff this rope hangs off will reveal a couple of Fulmer totems, as well as other Fulmer associated items, such as a Fulmer bow and basket with moonstone, implying that the Fulmer themselves were behind this scene. Now, the thing about the Fulmer is they're not exactly known for their tactfulness and respectfulness of the dead. In fact, it's implied that they literally eat people's remains, so it's unlikely that this corpse belonged to a person, as if it did, the Fulmer wouldn't have hung him, they would have done much worse. But if this wasn't a human being that the Fulmer strung up and hung, then whose remains are these? Could it be the Fulmer collectively decided to hang one of their own, and then left behind these icons as a way of paying their respects? But even that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I'm being honest. Whatever happened here, it's a secret that's lost with the snows of time. But with that, we are going to wrap up. 5 scary secrets you may have missed in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Which on this list was your personal favorite? For me, to be honest, it's probably the Dremora praying to Maroon's Dagon. I just, again, found that to be so adorable. Also, what scary scenes have you encountered throughout Skyrim that others may not have? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.